Mhm.
All right, and just like that, we are live. Hopefully, people will start filtering in here. But you want to go ahead and give an introduction, who you are, Mass Creations Broadcasts, who you are, what you do?
Hi, I'm Mass Creation Broadcast. I have a channel of my own on YouTube. The motto I put for my channel is that I'm trying to build the new aristocracy. I cover mostly politics, but also with some media and some religion. And Westward is currently scrolling through my page. And I do have a few videos coming up soon. I haven't released anything in February, but I'll try to release more during the next months of the year.
And I have the link to your channel in the description. I'll go ahead and throw the your X account in there as well. All right. So what did you want to talk about today?
Yeah, I brought to Westford a video by TMM, one of the atheists, which I'm not sure if you responded to before or not, but he has this 4 tests atheists can easily pass, and in my opinion, he doesn't do it very well, and he has a lot of gaps, and we want to discuss it today.
Okay, so I've never, as far as I know, never seen this guy's channel, but I can't imagine it's much better than most of his ilk. And here's his channel, TMM. I mean, high 60,000 subscribers, so pretty popular. 21 million views. He responded to Jim Bob, which would be fun to see. I like Jim Bob a lot. But
I think I've seen that one. It's so and so. Out of curiosity, could you go to the video tab and see sort by popular? I want to see if it's one of those channels which was popular 4 years ago. And
his most popular is from a decade ago.
Yeah. 3 years, 11 years.
Okay. Yeah. So his most recent hits are 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Why the secret is bullshit. I mean, I'd probably agree with that. And he is a dapper fellow. You could probably say soy. He looks like he's got his fedora on. So we're probably gonna hit Reddit tier. Gay. I'll leave that for you to decide. We'll see if your gaydar goes off or not. But he doesn't show a face in this video. This is the one we're going to be starting with. I apologize. I don't know who wrote that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, kids got my keyboard. Sorry, it auto-corrected.
Could you move the our feeds so that I can see the time? Okay.
Of course.
Great.
All right. So let's see what he has to say. He's reacting to a video, and we were reacting to his reaction. So here we go.
4 tests for atheism.
Imagine living in a world without ultimate meaning, where morality is just a social construct.
This is one of those guys who thinks saying X is a social construct means X is completely made up nonsense based on absolutely nothing. That's not what it means. Many social constructs are constructed on a foundation of natural phenomena. When we construct our moral systems, we don't choose moral rules arbitrarily. They are heavily influenced by our natural tendencies to feel empathy and righteous indignation. Because our emotions play such a big role in what we intuit to be moral or immoral, morality is subjective. But because our emotions are not totally arbitrary, our morals aren't either.
And the origin of
Did you have any reaction to that? I'll pull it back.
Yeah, I don't have it in my notes, but I remembered something I had to say about this. He's tried to justify the X is a social construct. And do you have any opinions on why this conversation of it's a social construct came as a criticism from the right?
Maybe not as in depth as you. You seem to have a pretty good answer to it. Can you go ahead and give it?
Yeah, it's mainly that this X is a social construct came from the left, and they kept saying that various norms and things which they didn't like were social constructs with the intention of dismissing them. And then the right took a response to that in order to call out their attitude. But because in the dictionary or in theory, the idea of a social construct is justifiable, now the midwit response is to say, but it's actually a good thing. And they completely forget all the history of the left of trying to dismantle things by calling them social constructs.
I see. So their tool was used against them, and they're like, wait, no, you can't use that tool that way. That's what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I watched probably you sent me this and like you can go ahead and take notes, whatever. I watched like 2 minutes, took some notes and I was like, you know what? This so far, there's nothing that's coming out of left field for me. I've got a black belt in defeating atheists, which, you know, only takes like a week to get. You move through the ranks pretty quickly. They don't have a much to offer, but obviously to me, this criticism of X as a social construct is asking them to give an epistemic justification. So he's not dealing with the is-ought gap of David Hume, or you could say he's committing the naturalist fallacy, because he's saying these are founded on natural phenomena, but just because something has its roots in nature, or you could say it's a social construct. The question is, this is the case. Why ought it be different? Why ought it be the case in the first place? Which is asking for a justification. Which is he going to be able to give a justification, or is he just going to do this dodge where, oh no, it's, you know, based in nature?
Oh, and also another thing which I found in the social construct discourse is that when they say something is a social construct and they try to dismantle it, they approach it in the terms of what it isn't. This is usually in terms of gender, like the non-binary thing. They keep describing what it isn't. The construct is just you want to know what it is.
Right. I mean, this also goes deeper. I mean, even just this slide, I mean, he's talking about we construct our moral systems. They aren't arbitrary. They're heavily influenced by natural tendencies to feel empathy and righteous indignation. I mean, obviously, again, that doesn't have any justification of why we ought act on our impulse of empathy or righteous indignation. And then I have deeper questions with the problems of the atheistic worldview, like, does he believe in free will? Where would free will come from? If he believes in evolution, then you have an evolutionary advantage to not act on your empathy, to do things that you would in your society deem immoral because they give you a competitive advantage. So
that's exactly the thing. There is this explanation which they sometimes try to come up with, that morality evolved out of social relations and the fact that we're a social species. But morality in many ways is a barrier to pro-tribal and pro-in-group tendencies. So there are many questions which they never try to answer because the answer doesn't serve them very well.
Right. Well, in the Christian worldview, we actually our moral system, which Christianity doesn't boil down to morals, but in our moral framework, you actually go against your own impulses all the time. That's the spiritual life, is to not act on your wrath, not act on your envy, not act on all these things, because that's the path to health. That's the path to Christ. That's bearing your cross, is denying yourself. But he's arguing that morals are just subjective. They're based off of our feelings. It doesn't hold any water. Emotions play such a big role in it, in what we intuit to be moral or immoral. Morality is subjective. Well, I always say if morality is subjective, then we're not actually talking about morality. It's something else.
You cut off
morality has to be objective.
Yeah, exactly. That was my case.
Yeah,
that was my case as well. It just you cut off a little bit. I also said something similar. I'm not sure if I already said it but I know I did say it in my video in which I responded to someone objecting to the moral argument. Is that when you're talking about something which can be subjective, you no longer talk about something which has the properties of morality.
Right. Yeah, well, it's like Emmanuel is saying here. It's not arbitrary. It's bad when it's bad. Oh, all right. Okay. All right. Around the merry-go-round. Yes. The moral argument, no atheist has ever gotten past it. It's always just boils down to either my feelings or some kind of attempt at an objective standard that can very easily self-refute. Well, in this society, we don't do this. I'm like, okay, well, when there's competition and there's another society, and that society benefits from oppressing your society or wiping you out, so they have more access to your resources. Well, then is that moral or immoral? That's their society's standard. So if it's just society standard, then it just ends up being might makes right.
And also at the same time, the standards of the present.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Every time you hear like humanists trying to like argue for their humanistic standards, like, well, even if we go back to the humanist manifesto. There's been like
Yeah,
three
I
of them or
read it.
something. They're
It's,
quite different than
mhm.
today, and there's even that's just totally arbitrary starting point and not justified, and they will just continue to drift in whichever really like whatever the oligarchs and the propagandists are telling them they should be morally outraged about.
Speaking of different standards of morality, I remember the debate Matt Dillahunty had with Andrew Wilson, I think, where Matt stormed off. And
Yep.
the main question there was when it comes to trans identities, you can have a secular moral system which affirms them, and a secular moral system which denies their identity and tries to help them without affirming them. And Matt simply would not process the idea that there ever could be justifiable that you would help them without affirming them.
Right. Yeah. Because if you have competing secular arbitrary standards of morality, you have no way to differentiate which one's objectively more moral or immoral. Which again, like that's every time you try to make it subjective, it's just there's no way to actually just discern, because using moral or immoral has to imply an objective standard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we can go on with the video.
Yeah, let me just get to a couple chats. Atheists don't know when they've lost, like how the blind don't know the color green. They cannot even allude to something outside of their limited sense data, or they feel slighted because of it. Yeah, I mean that's what we're going to discover, is that I imagine the theist or the Christian that is making the original video is going to make arguments that I would make, and I've never seen any atheists get around, and we're just going to see a lot of sidestepping or obfuscation or criticism. Coping criticisms that don't actually work. Like if you take half a second to process and think of them, it doesn't come from them. It's pure pride. Smuggling righteous. Yeah, that's another one. Righteous indignation. Well, in a naturalistic universe with no objective standard of right and wrong, righteous.
How did you determine what's righteous?
Yeah, how like my feelings. Okay, well, I feel like that's unrighteous. The nostalgia is already hitting hard. Takes me back to when I was 14, eating antidepressants and watching atheist YouTubers, the good old days. Yeah, I imagine you're in a much like physically healthier state. I imagine like you probably put on a little weight. Maybe the fedora weighs down on you a little bit too much, and that's where the hunch comes from. I'm not quite sure. I never was an atheist. But we can continue.
I was
now.
for about 4 years.
But because our emotions are not.
You're an atheist for 4 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, I've been a couple things, but never an atheist.
Not totally arbitrary, our morals aren't either.
And the origin of everything you see is left to chance.
If the origin of everything I see were left to chance, I would expect everything to be randomly configured. Maybe this guy means that, according to atheists, the origin of the universe itself is a product of chance. I don't believe that to be the case, because I don't believe the universe had an origin at all. There was never a time when the universe did not exist. So
that is a sidestep to a very obvious problem in atheism of the first cause. And he's smart enough to make that sidestep, because like if you're playing chess, like the normal game theory is that you bring up the everything has a first cause, everything has a cause, the universe must have a cause, it's infinite regress otherwise. So he's like, oh, I'm just gonna try to sidestep this by saying the universe always existed, even though that itself is just a statement of faith with no justification. At least maybe we'll see one, an attempt at one, but yeah, this is just him trying to sidestep and go like a less familiar route. So theists might be a little off kilter because they're like, well, that usually defeats them. You're not saying the right thing. So it's gonna take some people who aren't as experienced off the script.
You know what's funny? In the first 3 minutes, he supports two mutually contradictory positions on this exact question, and I will highlight when both of them happen.
Well, yeah, good question, Dustin. Good question. I've watched enough for that. I know that comes up. And Discord, I did not know you're a lady. This surprises me.
something that has never not existed does not need an origin.
It sounds bleak, right? But what if I told you that atheism, which is the belief that there is no God, fails 4 essential tests of truth?
I'm very curious about how this guy defines truth.
I'm very curious how you define truth. So far, it's like based off of like social constructs or my feelings or smuggled things.
Something like he doesn't define it; he just uses the term.
Right? Yeah. Let's keep going.
Perfect science.
Oh no!
Oh no, an ad!
I don't want to give this atheist money.
In this video, we're going to uncover those 4 tests and show how atheism collapses under scrutiny and reveal a worldview that truly satisfies both heart and mind. Stick around to the end to discover the truth that offers real hope and meaning. By the way, don't forget, if you like my analysis of atheism, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video so people can accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And this is what this
Gotta have an
channel
altar
is
car.
about.
This dude sounds like he thinks people can't accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior unless you promote his videos on social media.
I
Pause it
don't
here.
know.
Yeah. I had a problem with this in my comment. I mean, that's literally not how language works. He can promote his own message, but that doesn't mean that it's the only way that you can reach this way. And it's just a cheap midwit gotcha.
Yeah, this is a like a low blow that doesn't. I don't think he really thinks this. I think it's just him trying to get some little win or something like that. All right, buddy. If this is your standard, you shouldn't say like, comment, subscribe at all. Or what are you trying to do? Are you know, you have some nefarious means that you're going after? I don't know. That's dumb.
Thinks people can't accept Jesus as their
Okay,
Lord
come on.
and Savior unless you promote his videos on social media.
The correspondence test asks this: does this worldview match the observable world? Atheism claims the universe emerged from nothing without a cause.
No, it doesn't. I'm an atheist, and I don't believe that the universe emerged at all. Something doesn't need to
Pause right
emerge
there.
into
This
existence
is-
if there was never a time when.
This
What were
is
you
the first position. This is the first position he supports, that he believes that the universe didn't emerge at all; it didn't have a beginning. And in a little bit later, in less than a minute later, he'll believe the opposite thing.
Oh, that's interesting because even in here feels like a big contradiction. Let's listen in.
When it wasn't already in existence. It certainly didn't emerge from nothing because there never was nothing. At no time could there ever be nothing because at all times, at the very least, time exists. Even if time has only existed for 13.7 billion years since the Big Bang, there has never been nothing for that entire time, and there's no such thing as before time. That's the contradiction in terms.
I mean, I don't know how you could believe in the Big Bang and an eternal universe. Saying time has only lasted for 13.7 billion years, and that there's never been a time before time, that doesn't really make any sense to me.
It's maybe a thing like just the singularity was 13 billion years, so all the matter was in that place, but the universe didn't start. Then it just something justification.
Something wheel of time. This universe will die, and another one. I don't, it sounds like eternal generation or eternal emanation or something.
That's one of the.
But I don't know. I think this guy's more of a pantheist so far than an atheist, because in my mind, having an eternal universe, something that's eternal, that's like a divine property. So it would seem to me that would result in some kind of pantheism.
Yeah, they legitimately do not know the properties of the eternal. Like they never speak about anything which proves that they have an understanding of the term. And it's like just time doesn't go backwards or forward or something like this. But
and again, like this is a lack of, like, even Aristotle's first mover. Like, if there's a Big Bang and there's nothing before that, then he's saying there doesn't have to be a cause because he's eternal. But now he's saying that there was a starting point, or at least he's saying if there was a starting point 13.7 billion years ago, then how can it self-generate?
That entire time, and there's no such thing as before time. That's a contradiction in terms.
Yet the observable world shows us that everything with a beginning must have a cause.
Well, to say that something has a beginning is simply to say that it hasn't existed for an infinite amount of time. Since that's the case, and since it doesn't seem to be the case that there has been an infinite amount of time, everything has a beginning, including God if he exists.
No,
if
that's
the
a
universe
contradiction
began
Bob's
to
right
exist
here, because
there hasn't.
contradiction in terms.
Yeah, exactly. Just less than 1 minute, and he says the exact opposite of the thing he said earlier.
Yeah. Now he's saying that the universe didn't exist, right?
Yeah. This is a position which a couple of months back, I described as when somebody says to you A, you defend B, and when someone says to you B, you defend A. And you can never really tell what they believe, because they support both positions to defeat the other position.
Right. They'll switch modes depending on where the flank's being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's just maybe he's doing an internal critique or something like that. So there's like maybe an abstraction I have to work through. Well, to say that something has a beginning is simply to say that it hasn't existed for an infinite amount of time. Since that's the case, so now since he's saying since that is the case, that something hasn't existed for an infinite amount of time, that's not the word eternal. Eternal would mean it's existed for an infinite amount of time, correct? So to make sure I'm not getting accused of like not seeing an eternal. Oh, he's talking about this question of if time began and there was beginnings. But since he's saying this is the case, it seems to me he's denying the eternal existence of the universe.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, that's what that's got to be. Including God, if he exists. Well, since God is outside of time, before time, he is the creator of time. There would be no necessity for him to have an origin in the way that creation does. Uncreated would not have the same properties of created. If the universe began, let's just listen to him. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah,
been an infinite amount of time for which it could.
My next note is at 3:40, so that's when all the context ends, and I have a slightly longer comment with one theory which I came up with when listening to it the first time.
Okay.
So you can let it play until then.
Exist, then God had a beginning too. And if God had a beginning and everything which begins to exist has a cause, then God must have had a cause, right?
The Bible says in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4, "For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God." How can atheism explain this foundational principle of causality?
I don't believe it is a foundational principle of causality. I don't believe that everything which hasn't been around for infinite time needs a cause. Specifically, I don't believe that the space-time continuum, which is what the universe is, needs a cause, because that requires the creation of time. I don't believe that time can be created, because you can't create something at a time when it already exists. Even at the very first moment that something exists, it's already too late to create it. Since there was obviously never a time when time didn't already exist, time cannot be created.
Atheists argue.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a bunch of gobbledygook.
Do you have any opinions on it?
Okay, I don't believe it is a foundational principle of causality. This sounds like he's just going to refuse to answer and give a justification. I don't believe that everything which has been around for infinite time needs a cause. Okay, I don't care what you believe necessarily. I want to know what's logically the case. I want to know what's the logical necessity. I don't really care about your psychological state. Specifically, I don't believe that space-time continuum, which is what the universe is. But as an atheist, can you be an atheist who? There's like Platonic atheists or whatever. But atheism, in my mind, is nominalistic, and the universe or reality is a transcendental category. You can't really point to the universe as a whole. We can't quantify it. You can only point to particulars within what we would call the universe, which is a transcendental metaphysical category. So the space-time continuum needs a cause, because that requires the creation of time. I don't believe that I don't care what you believe can be created, because you can't create something at a time when it already exists. So he's saying it came into existence without creation. Even at the very first moment that something exists, it's already too late to create it. So he's just granting himself that. It didn't need to be created. It didn't exist, and then it existed, but that's just because it did. but it's too late for it to be created because it was already created.
Mhm.
That isn't that I just don't understand how that makes any sense.
That's it. Can I go over my things?
Yeah, of course.
So this might need some finesse afterwards, but this is what I say. No, what he says doesn't follow. You can, for example, look at the properties of time, see if it's dependent on anything, and in your case, you do. You don't think time exists as its own entity, it exists as part of space-time. So if someone was to create time, that would also create space. So the creator would need to not be dependent on either space or time. Now, the question I ask myself is there anything that exists that is not dependent on space? Do you have an answer to that?
I mean, since the universe and time are both metaphysical, transcendental categories, they do not exist in space itself. I mean, any of the transcendentals, identity, all of these things are not going to exist within physical space. You can't hold time in your hand. You can't hold reality in your hand.
Yeah. The answer I came up with, which is the closest to the point we want to get him towards, is that minds also don't need to exist in space and in time.
Yeah, of course.
They don't have properties of physical matter. You cannot divide the mind. You cannot do all of these things which you can do with space time. That doesn't mean that the mind cannot attach itself to matter in some mechanism which partakes to minds. And this is how we could experience time, even though we have a mind, and we also experience time by its connection. So from this, we know that if we are to find the creator, it would be more similar to a mind than to matter. And God has been described for a long time as a mind. So we reach here a little bit of a part of a solution, at least. And this is what I left off my comment.
Yeah, I wouldn't even grant him mind. Like, and most atheists will deny that there is a mind, or they'll do what Matt Delahunty did when Jim Bob pressed him. He said, "My mind is what my brain does," and then he said, "My mind doesn't exist." So he did the same A to B, B back to A, because he couldn't justify mind because mind is immaterial. So when he says that only things that exist are material, he's like, okay, well, where's your mind? My mind is an emergent property of my brain. It is what my brain does. Okay, can you demonstrate that? My mind doesn't exist. I'm just a naturalistic machine. It's a crazy video. I want to get to a few comments. Austin Detilio says, well, our souls are eternal, but are created, have a beginning. But God can destroy the soul, though. Yeah, so we could say our souls are eternal in that we cannot destroy them. We cannot make them cease to exist. But they don't have the same property as uncreated because they are only eternal by like the grace of God. That God can, through His will, He could destroy a soul and prevent it. He could annihilate it. He doesn't. We don't believe in annihilationism. That like when people go to hell, they just cease to be or whatever. But I mean that's within God's ability, because He is what sustains our existence. All right.
Time didn't already exist. Time cannot be created.
Atheists argue that life exists by chance, but scientists have shown that the universe's constants like gravity, electromagnetism, and others are fine-tuned for life.
Why would an all-powerful God need to futz around with the settings of the universe in order to get it to hold life? You'd think an all-powerful God would have the power to put life into a universe with...
Go on.
Yeah, so what he says here, it's not implied by the argument. We know the universe that we live in, but that doesn't mean that God had to make our universe such as this. He could have made 100,000 million types of universe which can hold life. So that doesn't follow.
Yeah, I might even I would have to listen to the rest of the atheist argument, but I might actually side more with the atheist than the Christian here, because I don't think the fine-tuning argument is a good argument. I think it's like a good rhetorical tool, and actually would. Yeah, I think it could like rhetorically convince some people, because if there is a random probabilistic universe like the atheist thinks it is, that there's no guiding hand, why would things be the way they are? Why would they be so finely tuned? Why would our bodies be the way they are? Why would the heavenly bodies be the way they are? Why would everything be so finely tuned? But I think the atheists can easily just go like, oh, well, crazy things happen every day. I think they could dismiss it because I don't think it's actually giving like an epistemic. It's not giving a justification, but it is pointing out all of these things where you'd have to have, you could say you have to have a lot of faith that it's just random, because a lot of atheists will even say we have to keep in mind that even though there's the grand appearance of design in the universe, we have to remember that it's not design. So they like brainwash themselves into believing that there isn't any fine tuning happening, that this is all by chance. It's all probabilistic. So that's what they believe. And I don't think the fine tuning is actually going to get them past that, because they can wave it out of hand.
One thing about fine tuning which helped me understand the argument a little bit better is that the fine tuning, the term itself, relates to the fact that the range of values for each of the constants of the universe, for everything, is very small.
Right, like the Earth being not too far away from the sun, not too close, the rotation, all these different things. I mean, this is like what I heard. I heard this argument a lot when I was a Protestant, and it's one of those arguments that it falls. I just don't think it goes as far as some people want it to go.
I think, when we talk about the specifics, like in the case with the position of the Earth, that's a little bit further away from what the fine-tuning argument tries to argue for. It more talks about the constants of the universe, so how much gravity there is, how strong the electromagnetic force is, how much matter there is, how chaotic, how much. Yeah, that's mainly what it refers to.
Yeah, it falls apart because it's an evidentialist argument. It brings evidence after evidence after evidence of fine tuning, but it's applying its own interpretation of design on top of that, where the atheist can say, "I just interpret that data differently." So you have to get at the presuppositional framework of how they interpret data, which is a much stronger argument.
Yeah.
Any parameters. In fact, if it were the case that we lived in a universe with a set of parameters that made the natural development of life impossible, that would be far greater evidence that life is not a merely natural phenomenon.
Chance doesn't correspond to such precision.
Well, I have, I think, a good question here. Do you have any examples to compare against to justify fine-tuning claim? Do I have any examples that would go against fine-tuning? I mean, I think that there's just example after example, and like a lot of the things that have been brought up against it have been falsified over time, such as like vestigial organs. Like, oh, this organ's a product of evolution. It's just like we still have it, but doesn't have any real value, doesn't have any function. And then later on, they find functions. So I would say that nothing comes in my mind specifically as an example against fine tuning in an evidentialist manner, but I'm sure you could. Like I think a lot of things that are like product of the fall, that like death and corruption that has entered the world, you might be able to use against fine tuning. But again, these are just stacking up evidences, and it's not really getting at the problem, which is how you interpret the evidence. You have a comparative universe to compare with the one we exist in. Do I have a comparative? I mean, this is the only universe I have. And most of the times we do like a hypothetical universe. The only real utility in that is to try to show a logical necessity of something. Which I had. There's a funny example of one of my videos is arguments against how if Christians argued like atheists, and one common one was, I can prove that God doesn't exist because if I imagine a world in which God doesn't exist, then therefore it's a possibility. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense, because you are the creator in this model of a hypothetical universe. So you were necessary to imagine that universe. So you're actually making an argument against atheism. That if we work out the logic, it's actually a necessity for there to be a cause of that imaginary world. That doesn't show any logical necessity that a God can exist without it. If that universe could hypothetically exist without someone hypothesizing, then you'd have something. But
that is following the logical chain, and it's very good. It's better than what time will bring up now. But when you imagine something, you can decide what to ignore. So if God would be necessary, and he is, but you could simply ignore all the properties which would prove that he is necessary, and so it counts to nothing.
You cannot imagine an entire universe other than the incomprehensibility of it. Yeah, like it's imagine a color that doesn't exist. It's your brain can't really get there. Okay, Dustin's typing a second comment, but I think people botch the fine-tuning argument too frequently. They focus on simple things like the Earth's distance from the sun. I think the only things to point to are actually the precision of the laws of the governing universe, the laws of physics needing to be exactly the way they are. Otherwise, nuclear forces wouldn't hold atoms together. I mean, yeah, that's getting that's the laws of the universe. That'd be more metaphysical. That's getting past the nominalism of there's only particulars. So I mean, that'd be still that'd be kind of a move away from evidentialism of just physical facts.
Yeah, it's
the laws governing the physical facts.
Someone who I saw describe the fine-tuning argument very well and much better than most versions. You can search for apologetics squared version of it, like the guy with a square for a head in Doodle. He has a pretty simple style. Yeah, you can play the video pretty soon, I think. No, actually, hold up. I had a note for this one. Right. He says in here that if the laws of the universe didn't permit for life, I think in the previous panel from 405, something like that. And my comment, which I had to that is, well, if there was a universe which didn't allow for life, then obviously life wouldn't exist there. And if life existed there, somehow, despite the conditions of the universe being impossible for life, it would mean that it is sustained by something. And
right.
God's will would make an exception for life to exist in that part of the universe, even though normally without this additional sustaining, it would be impossible. So those beings wouldn't see the universe as one in which life is impossible, because they would see the supplementation by God as sustaining them as part of the universe, even though it isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Skyworks 600 says, are you claiming a natural universe is impossible? I mean, yeah, like I just said, if you try to imagine a naturalist universe, it actually self-defeats. It's a contradiction. So we live in a universe that was created by God. That's the transcendental argument. And imagining a naturalist world universe without God is impossible because it's self-defeating.
Believe that the laws and constants of the universe came about by chance. There was never a time when they were different, and we know of no.
I want to know what he means by natural. Plus, there's also God is the source of all being. So, in that sense, I'm not sure how he interprets natural.
I mean, I read that as a universe in which a God does not exist. It's a naturally occurring universe. It's the two routes would be it's eternal, which is kind of what the author of this video we're watching said, even though he contradicted himself. So it has to be either a universe that self-actualized without a cause, which doesn't make sense, or it has to be not actualized in a way that it had no origins. It's just eternal, and it's naturalistic. It follows its own laws. God is an imaginary phantom tone. You probably believe in monkey magic, bro. So I don't. Do you believe in evolution? Because that is an actual fairy tale. So if you want to come over here and talk to me about monkey magic and other nonsense pseudoscience fairy tales, you can do that. But I'm not going to give you much. Not going to give you much.
No means by which they can change, so we have no reason to infer that they were ever free to vary.
I don't believe the laws and constants of the universe came about by chance. Okay, how did they come about? There was never a time when they were different, and we know of no means by which they can change. So we have no reason to infer that they were ever free to vary. If there's laws, who is the lawgiver? Oh, they're just themselves. I'm just going to grant myself the laws of the regularity of nature without any justification.
Yeah, I have two things to say about this. One is I had 2 videos responding to atheist responses to apologetics, and I left it on a cliffhanger on exactly this point, because they're trying to argue for coincidence. The laws were always the same, but then they don't know a reason, so they don't expect it to change. This is just coincidence. But what he says here, his framing of it, that's not what chance means, and that's not how you disprove chance. Chance would be disproven by a rule, not by we've only known these conditions.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, probability itself, you'd have to know what the actual numbers going into it are to know if it's probabilistic or not, right? If you don't have the number set, you wouldn't actually know if it's by chance or probability or anything like that.
Isn't design a more logical conclusion? If atheism can't explain the origin and order of the universe, is it really aligned with reality?
I don't think it's coherent to say that the universe.
Wait. This is a great comment by Dustin. Everything material is always changing. Plants beget other plants and they die. And especially from an atheist worldview who believes in monkey magic, they believe that everything's evolving, that no, there's no such thing as natures. There's no immutable nature that's always evolving and changing. But the laws themselves don't change. So, like Dustin said, that's special pleading. Why would immutable, unchanging laws create constant flux? Yeah, God created the universe. There you go.
Hold up, don't play the video yet. He's now trying to argue that he doesn't think it's coherent to say that the universe had an origin. And my response to this was, why? Why exactly isn't it coherent?
Because he doesn't think so. He doesn't think so.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't think so because he doesn't think so. Okay, so you know that things happen in the universe, and when they do, they're caused by other things which consume some energy, to transform it from a more useful state to a less useful state, and so on. So you can walk backwards until the energy was at its maximum, because otherwise you reach the problem of infinity, what I called. If there ever was infinite energy, then there would never be a point in which there would be finite energy, because you would have somehow have to get rid of all the infinite energy. So by the very fact that we have finite energy, we know that there was a maximum.
The funny thing is about this comment is that God done it is infinitely better than anything he could ever come up with. That God done it is perfectly logical, and there's actually not any logical explanation outside of that. It's always just going to be self-defeating.
Yeah, it just, this thing happened. You believe this thing happened? Yes.
Well, you believe it happened from nothing, or that it was always the case. But can you prove that the universe was eternal, that always the case? Well, the laws can't change. Okay, well, what if they did at one point and now we just don't have access to that previous state? Well, that can't be the case. Why? Can you demonstrate it? No. Okay, so it's just your faith. It's just you think. I think this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think that. So do you have anything else?
The constancy is just an assumption, and ironically, it's an assumption which, by the very fact that it is constant, means that it has to stay in place. It doesn't have any variability which would change it into something else. So you could argue on this basis that it's being held in place, which would point towards a higher power.
I believe it was David Hume that pointed out that the belief that the sun will rise tomorrow is actually a faith. It's a faith that you have. It's not, you can't actually prove it. When the sun rises up tomorrow, that's evidence that it's the case, but it's not evidence that it'll come up the next day. That's an assumption. Yeah. You have to assume the laws of nature. You can actually prove that they will exist further into time, and we can't prove that they've existed for all time. We don't have access to those things. So to say that these things, like he said, it's always been the case that the laws of nature have held true. This is just a faith statement. This is his religious belief, but he can't prove it in any way.
And also, there's another thing when we're moving up the metaphysics ladder. So even if we would know the laws of the universe, like what they are, we would not know the properties which would make them a law of the universe, like what keeps that from being a thing in itself. So we know its context, it's just that we do not know the structure of the law of the universe, what I'm trying to say.
He says, I start to sound like Jim Bob. That's a great compliment. Thank you. That dude is very smart, and God done it, man. God done it, and that's smarter than anything you'll probably ever come up with. So you believe monkeys can poof human people into existence. So you're kind of retarded.
Universe had an origin, and why would order need an explanation? If the parameters of the universe changed all the time, I could understand wanting an explanation for that. But if no such changes occur, what is there to explain?
Since you don't have any way to prove or justify the constancy of the laws of nature, and you believe everything is in constant flux, then we should expect that the laws of nature should be constantly in flux. Since they're not in constant flux, then why? It just doesn't make any sense. There's no changes to occur. What is there to explain? So he's saying, because the laws of nature are constant, I don't have to give them a justification. It's just that they are that they are. Don't ask me deeper questions, bro. I don't have answers, bro. Just trust me, bro.
Something I commented here as well, besides that point, is the fact that some things change and some things remain constant, like the laws of the universe. Yeah, that does need additional explanation, because there are two positions which do not need as much explanation. The position of everything changes, including the laws of the universe and everything in it, and the position of constant order, so nothing changes. These positions do not really need much of an explanation. But the fact that some things stay constant and some things change, yeah, this does require explanation.
Yeah, it's similar to earlier with the moral argument. He was, let me see if my brain doesn't fail me. He was saying that morals are subjective, so that they be ever changing, but he's also appealing to these unchanging objective values like righteousness. So if it was subjective and just society based, we wouldn't appeal to those. I'm not saying it the way my brain had it like 3 seconds ago, but maybe it'll come back to me. So he's saying, in a universe that's in constant flux, we don't see the laws of change, the laws of nature change. So that's not in unity. That's not congruent with his belief in constant flux. I mean, I was trying to make a parallel between that and the moral argument. I had it worded in my head and then it went away. Maybe it'll come back to me. Sometimes it does. Mass creations. We got a bigger audience now. Do you want to go ahead and shout yourself out one more time? That we got eyeballs on you.
Yeah, sure. So for my presentation again, I have my own YouTube channel, mostly focused around politics, with some media commentary and some defense of Christianity. And the main drive, the main goal of my channel is building a new aristocracy. I'm also a monarchist, and I will have a few videos being released next week, hopefully, on exactly the current state of democratic politics and a plan for turning a republic into a monarchy. And I hope that many of you will join my channel, and you will enjoy those videos as well, together with my previous catalog.
At least I mean, this sounds like a little bit of self-awareness. I'm cooking some dinner. Hope it's tasty. Hope it's nutritious. I wish the best for you, even though you believe in fairy tales, my brother. Don't know if you're brother or sister. Don't know. But listen to your argument from incredulity. I mean, that's all you have is incredulity. That's all you have. That's all any atheist has is incredulity. All right.
I don't see why order always needs an explanation.
Well, what I was trying to say earlier is if something that is the case is contradictory to your presuppositions, to your priors, then you do have to justify it. Why is it in flux when it's clear these things are clearly not in flux? That's a contradiction. So I'm asking for a justification, and he's saying, I don't see why I need to give an explanation. Okay, well then I don't believe you. I'm sorry.
occur, what is there to explain? I don't see why order always needs an explanation.
I think it's out of this world.
All right. Okay, Jim Bob, I'll help him out. Westford's critiquing somebody else's argument. It's not incredulity. Oh, I think his argument's bad because, like, it's just what I think, man. My brain told me it's a bad argument, and that's all I have to go by. All I have to go by is my own fifis, my brain, and it's a naturalistic mechanism, anyways, dude. There's no mind. My mind is what my brain does, and my brain mind tells me it's not a good argument. So, like, I don't see the reason to give him any justification or explanation. I think it's a bad argument. Therefore, it is. I mean, that's his explanation of why this guy's argument's bad, because he thinks so. So,
yeah, remember how the video started
my
with
chemicals are telling me, bro.
Remember how the video started with
I
don't believe.
Yep. Well, yeah, we that's what defines you.
We'll revisit this. Consistency asks, does this worldview contradict itself? Atheism, or atheists, often say morality is subjective, shaped by evolution or society. But then, why do atheists also claim things like murder or oppression are basically objectively wrong?
Well, I don't claim that anything is objectively wrong. There are things that are intolerable to my conscience, but I don't see how that makes them objectively wrong.
At least you see that. At least you see that.
Something which
I don't even see how God could make morality.
Criticism here of the person he's responding to is that I think he should have kept more to one theme, because if he addresses both cosmology and the moral argument and everything at the same time, then that would just confuse a lot of people who just want to dismantle and attack everything he's saying. If he kept all his analogies in the same sphere, then maybe he would have made a better polemic.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I think a lot of these arguments can strengthen each other when they're interwoven. I look at it as like tag is kind of the bed you can put other arguments on top of. This is what Van Til and Bahnsen argue, that the like the cosmological argument, the moral argument, all these different arguments are actually strengthened when they are put in front of the transcendental argument, that you actually are more consistent when that's your starting point.
The objective, because God is a subject, not an object, so his morality would still be subjective, even
if God was the objective arbiter of morality, it would just be subject, not objective. Well, at least even my little brother, who's got so many issues, still says he knows he cannot make any argument for morality, but he'll say, I have a very strong moral sense that these things like being against trans issues or LGBT alphabet soup stuff, that's very immoral, and I have a very strong feeling of morality in me. But he says, I know I can, and I think he even uses these terms. I know I have no justification for an objective standard without God, that God is the only way to have an objective standard. Even, at least my little brother is ahead of this dude.
Yeah, there's also the other aspect that he's trying to delegitimize God by claiming his perspective is also subjective, which is ironic because he's arguing for the same thing on one level. And also, it's incorrect because if God was just as subjective as anyone, then there would be things which could impose themselves onto God. And there aren't.
So he's saying even if God is eternal and unchanging, that it wouldn't be objective. But what is objective other than eternal and unchanging? And he said there's no non-circular reason why we ought to do what God says, and that is a fair point, because at the deepest level of metaphysics or epistemology, you can't get away from circularity. A classic example is try to justify reason without using reason. You can't. You have to use circularity. You have to show non-contradiction. If you try to show non-contradiction without using the law of non-contradiction, like, you can't. So that's not really a point against objective or justification, because some things from a metaphysical point of view, you can't get away from circularity. It's not possible. Because God says so. All right.
if it's eternal and unchanging. Also, there's no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to do what God says. Why should we do what God says? If you press apologists on this, the only answer they can ultimately give is because God says to.
I like Dostoevsky. He was kind of one of my first introductions to orthodoxy. And in Brothers Karamazov, Ivan says, if there is no God, then I am God, which is exactly right. If there's no objective standard, then I can create my own objective standard. And there's an atheist. There's a couple atheist churches here in my area, and like one of their biggest talking points is that I think this is what I was trying to talk about with the moral argument. I think it came back to me that there is no objective truth, that the universe really has no meaning, and our lives are meaningless in a meaningless universe. And at the end of the universe is just heat death, and nothing's ever going to be remembered, and it's all going to pass away, and it's all for nothing. So therefore, we can create whatever meaning we want. I'm going to be a veterinarian. It's like, well, no. You can't just, that's special pleading. You can't just grant yourself meaning after you've said there's no meaning. Like, say the first part again. There's no meaning. But no. Stop. What was the first part? There's no meaning. Okay, what was the second part? You can create your own meaning when there's no meaning, and
which is also no meaning.
From meaning, and your nature would be no meaning. It's not even nature in anyways, and everything's in flux. And anyways,
Romans 2:15 explains it
hold up,
perfectly.
rewind a little
perfectly.
bit. I want to
Says,
see
which
his text at 526, or something very close to it.
Yeah, there. Yeah, I think this is it.
Let's see if you press. Okay. Well, it's saying here something about why is God the standard? What's his standard? And my response to this was because God decides what should be done. You cannot apply the category of should without appealing to God, because he created shouldness. Is the same way as asking, why should I use measurement to compare things? Because the result you want, the comparison, is dependent on the quality you want to avoid, the measurement. And it's such in this case. The shouldness, the morality is the result you want, but that is dependent on God. So you're
again, it's just the is-ought gap. It's the is-ought gap. The atheists will never get past that, even if they understand it. Like, they just never do. They can't. I feel like I should do this. Okay, well, why ought you follow your feelings? Why ought that be the case? Oh, well, it is the case. Okay, well, why? And they'll say is. It is. Okay, why? It is. That's all you'll ever get.
The only answer they can...
It perfectly explains the issue perfectly. Says, which show the work of the law written in their hearts. Morality points to a moral lawgiver, God, who wrote the law in our hearts from the beginning.
Then why is it that people's moral intuitions can be so fundamentally different? Sometimes apologists say that some people are tricked into believing something is...
Okay, to his current objection, you are told that the law is written on our hearts, but he was not told that it's transmitted perfectly clearly and there exist no mechanisms of obscuring it, including our own will to obscure it. The law,
I was going to bring that. Yeah.
The law existing doesn't mean that we can reach it perfectly. Well, we can, but doesn't mean that we have reached it perfectly, and is the only thing that we can accept.
Who do you hit you? I don't know if that I got this thing. I don't know if it wasn't working.
Who chew? Sorry if it's not.
That's my my bagel now. I got a little Jew harp. I think we might have one, guys. My harp was going off. If a statement comports with reality, it's true. Okay, you can't justify reality or true, so that's a meaningless statement. We have many methods to justify our beliefs about reality. Please do so. You can't. You cannot do so from a naturalistic framework. Yeah, I think we got him, guys. Pretty sure.
Hey, cool. Call it with the unsymmetrical one.
Moral when it's really Satan or their sinful nature, which is deceiving them into thinking that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So he's talking about the law written on our hearts. I mean, yeah, with free will, I believe you can do two things. And in the Orthodox Church, we believe that you are in a state of flux, in that you are always moving away from God or towards God. You're never really in a static place. That if you were in a static place, you'd actually be going further away from God, because your nature, what you are called to do, is to move towards God in an active way. So you can choose to align yourself with God and his precepts, which would be in the Orthodox Church, we have a doctrine of the nous, and we believe that you were made in the image of God, and my brain just stopped again. Yeah, you're made in the likeness and the image of God. So everyone's made in the image of God, but through the fall, our likeness to that image has been besmirched. So through our free will, we can move towards God, which will be cleaning up our nous, the spiritual faculty in which we can see and know God, in which would be moving towards the likeness of God. We become more like God, which is what our nature is, what we are called to do. Or you can sear your conscience. You can go against the voice in your head. You can make decisions to do sinful things, which is going to muddy up the likeness of your image even further, and make it harder for you actually to discern reality and to discern what ought be the case.
If that's the case, how do we distinguish the real moral law from what we are deceived into thinking is the real moral law?
Well,
For this
how do we
one,
know when anything's a lie? Everything could be a lie. How do I know anything?
I responded to this with a passage from Matthew 7, that by their fruits you'll know them. So the good things will result in a better understanding, a more developed righteousness, and those who aren't will be just degeneration, copes, and stuff like this.
Yeah, and I mean, even with that, I would still say that you have to get to a precept level, because they don't have the same, like, admittedly, they don't have the same understanding of good and evil. It's just whatever you feel. So he's going to say, like, well, my feeling's always going to, even my feeling changes, it's always going to be my feelings. So you have to try to get at what is the framework of morality to show that, I mean, as we've done here, I think pretty sufficiently, that you can't have morals in a subjective framework. So I know we need to show good fruits. We need to try to obtain good fruits, and we can clearly show that. We can ask people to come and see, taste, and know that the Lord is good. But still, even that, there's going to be people that will they call evil good and good evil. You know, like they are going to twist things and disbelieve. So even with, like, my wife was like, I think you can tell that Islam's not true just by, like, the way they treat women and how they abuse them, and how they kill people, they throw people off of the buildings and everything. Like, you can see that they don't have good fruits. I'm like, yeah, that's true, and it's kind of like the fine-tuning argument, where I think that's, like, good rhetoric, but still that's assuming the Christian moral framework, which probably is what's in question. So if from somebody who believes in the Christian framework and what good fruits actually are, as opposed to bad fruits, you still need to address that part. So, I mean, if you're talking to somebody, like, bringing these things up, a lot of people will convert and be convinced just through that, because the law is written on their heart, and it'll speak to them. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good or fully justified true belief, if that makes sense, or that it hasn't been presented as such.
Yeah, it does. And since it was mentioned of the behavior of Muslim, I'm reminded of how they fully celebrate when there's this violent revolution which serves Islam, or something like this. And whenever something like Palestine, they're all suddenly victims, that they just everybody is against them. It's very mean, but they ignore everything that they did prior, and their behavior in any other context.
Okay, what else you got?
Consulting the Bible is not much help because even folks who try their best to base their morality on the Bible will come away from it with contradictory moral axioms.
Well, if you have sola scriptura, I would say that that's the case, because that puts it back. The interpretation of the Bible is based off of you and how you feel about it, or you could say it's out of its context. So that would be a good point against that, but I would not say that it's a good point against historic Christianity.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts on that? He's saying that the Bible is not much help because people can get contradictory moral axioms out of it.
Well, I am agreeing with you that just the book itself, you could misinterpret verses and stuff like this, and using the tradition of the church is clearly superior because you can see which interpretations are more consistent and more aligned, more profound.
So I mean, I would say that that's just that he's critiquing sola scriptura, that way of interpreting scripture, which I would agree with this point, but I wouldn't say that actually is critiquing the Bible or Christianity itself. Just that, from my perspective, faulty doctrine.
He leaves himself into ambiguity. He doesn't give any examples. So when he says that there are contradictory standards, we don't know what he's thinking about, and we can only speculate.
Right. I mean, I could point some out from like my experience in Protestantism or whatever, and like seeing different sects coming up with contradictory positions, but that'd be me doing his work for him.
Yeah.
God created the sinless pair, Adam and Eve. The sinless pair, Adam and Eve. And they had the law of God written in their hearts, but they made the wrong decision.
Why would a perfectly loving,
Decision.
infallible God make such fallible humans? Apologists will often blame human imperfections on original sin, but you can't use that excuse for the moral fallibility that Adam and Eve must have already had in order to commit that sin in the first place. They will also blame free will, but does God not have free will? If God does have free will, but is also morally infallible, why couldn't he have...
Oh my God! If bad thing happened, is that all I'm hearing?
Yeah, and from here, from 648 to 654, could you bring it to play?
Sorry, 650. What was it? One more time.
48 to 54. So just one click leftward.
Well, if God does have free will, but is also morally infallible, why couldn't he have created us to both have free will and be morally infallible? If God does not have free will, then why should we value it? If not having free will is good enough for God, should...
My comment I gave to this is that, well, he didn't. You feeling bad about it doesn't make it so, but I would need to see exactly for what timestamp that was. But if it doesn't really, if it does really want an explanation and answer, I would say that our free will being different from God's is that the way that we have it is a greater demonstration of will. God doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, so he can have free will and be morally infallible. But we, as creation of God, would need to prove ourselves, at least to him. So our free will comes with moral fallibility.
Yeah, and obviously we have free will. I mean, if you claim that we don't have free will, that's contradictory statement. And God must have free will, because if we have free will, then God cannot give us what he doesn't have. So therefore, God has free will if we have free will.
I have a meme on libertarian free will versus compatibilist free will. And maybe I'll send it to you behind the scenes and we can look at it later. But we obviously have free will, because nothing stops you. Nothing stops your will when you're willing something. Do you feel your will constrained by anything? No. So you have free will.
I mean, they'll say like, "Oh, this is just naturalistic laws that are playing. I'm just a product of evolutionary forces, and that's where my free will comes from. So it's not actually me." If you deny free will, then you can't actually have a self. You can't have a person. Can't have a subject. There's no agent, because there's no one willing. There's just naturalistic forces. So if you are trying to engage in debate or argumentation to argue that free will does not exist, then you can't debate that. That you already lose when you enter the ring of debate, because it's about changing somebody's mind, having them freely be convinced or not. If it's not that, then all you're saying is the truth, or what comports with reality, is just a brain state, a chemical state within my brain, and I am using sounds to try to change the state of your own brain. That's what it has to boil down to. My chemicals are better than your chemicals.
Shouldn't it be good enough for me? Why would I even want free will if it puts me in danger of committing immoral acts?
Why would you want free will? You couldn't want free will unless you had free will. Ugh.
I'd much rather be morally infallible than have free will.
You see, there is
My
this
response I gave
moral
to that
principles
was,
that are ingrained in
I'd
everyone.
I'd rather be morally infallible than have free will. I wished him luck of getting into heaven if he wants moral infallibility that much.
Well, I mean, doesn't he already kind of think he has moral infallibility because he thinks that things are just true because he thinks that they are, and that things are moral because he thinks they are? So isn't that just infallibility?
Yeah,
He grants himself
exactly.
infallibility.
A very good question we could ask them on this theme is, what immoral thing do you believe? Is this something which they could ever answer? Right. Structurally, not a matter of admitting to something, but could they ever conceive of anything that they believe to be immoral?
Right. Well, their own argument would have to undercut anything they would say is immoral, because, well, if society is just what determines what is immoral, first off, that's an appeal to the masses. That's a fallacy itself. But we could just propagandize the masses in order to change what something is from moral to immoral, and vice versa. So you wouldn't be able to actually say something is immoral.
And it's not only to the masses; it's also to the individual. They say that morality is subjective, but how could the subject tell that one's own beliefs are immoral?
Right. You wouldn't be. No one would ever be able to do anything immoral, because it always be based within your own naturalistic mechanisms, or your own desires, your own context, or whatever. So anything you do would be moral, right?
Not necessarily. The action is different. The morality and immorality that we're looking for are the goals themselves. Can you truly hold goals which you see as immoral? Not really. It's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, you'd always come up with some justification, to the means justify the ends, right?
The other way around.
The other way around, the ends justify the means. Wait, did I just say the same thing twice?
Means
justify the ends. Where am I? Where am I? How did I get here?
Let's see what's next. Pause. Reset.
Okay. And this is a point that there must be a creator who had done this work in us. Atheists argue that a good God would not allow evil. Yet in rejecting God, they're left with no standard for calling anything evil.
That doesn't make it any less legitimate to point out when God fails to live up to his own standards. Saying that God contradicts the standards that are purported to be his in no way requires me to subscribe to those standards. I'm not stealing God's morality, as some apologists claim, when I'm pointing out that he is depicted as doing things that are evil by his own standards.
That's not the case. And you would be stealing God's morality if you say that things like stealing or murder or anything like that is wrong. That you wouldn't be able to justify that without a Christian worldview.
And there are two aspects here that he needs to be careful of. One of them, let me think. One of them is the problem of knowledge. You know part of what happened, what you've been told, but in a grander scheme of things, even though you interpret it as evil, that doesn't mean that there isn't some context which you're not aware of, which would make it not evil. And also, his goal here is something that he's moved away from, and he forgot that he was trying to prove the following. So I'm telling to TMM, remember that you're not talking about God's philosophy, you're talking about a moral philosophy without God. So when you describe morality, you don't just use morality when it comes to God's own actions, you use morality to discuss acts which are not God's. the apologist is trying to tell you that your very appeal to morality comes from God. The way to contradict that is to show how morality does not originate from God, not to say that you think God contradicts himself.
Right. To say that God contradicts himself, that's just an argument from incredulity, because it always boils down to, well, God's immoral or it contradicts his own standards, because that's not what I would do if I were God. Not that I have a God complex or think I'm infallible, even though I am, and I clearly do. But yeah, God doesn't do what I want to do. Therefore, no God. So it's just an argument from incredulity.
Yeah, and I have one more note, which is close to minute 9. So
let me see. I have the meme here. It's loading. Here we go. Compatibilist free will, mental gymnastics. You will something at time X. You will something at time X. Got to go at the emphasis there. No one changes what you will, making the decision for you. No one changes what you will, making the decision for you. You have free will. Libertarian free will, mental gymnastics. First, you need to time travel, or you must have access to all universes. You should have the ability to have done something different. If you can't retroactively change your will, you don't have it. If someone knows what you will have willed, you don't have free will. Yeah, I mean, that's saying that God's foreknowledge of what our will be or decisions will be. That's okay, cool. But like, show me where the contradiction is, because if God has foreknowledge of our decisions, that in no way negates our free will. Even if you think that it seems like it does, okay, well, show it. Show me how foreknowledge.
You still will it. You still make the decision. You still make the decision, even though someone else knows where you're going to end up.
Right. I know my daughter's going to get upset when I say, no, you can't have a cookie. Does that mean she isn't willing to want a cookie or willing to
be upset
to
about
give into her emotions? Yeah, that's not the case. Oh, I took away her free will because I knew how she'd react. If I have enough game theory, I will negate everyone's free will.
Yeah.
Comprehensiveness. Comprehensiveness asks this question: can this worldview explain the big questions of life? Atheism argues life arose through chemical evolution, but life's complexity, especially DNA's coded information, defies naturalistic explanations.
No, it doesn't. Coded information is simply non-randomness. It doesn't need to come from any intelligence. If a rock falls into some mud, the shape of the indentation it leaves will be information about the shape of the rock that made.
This is granting yourself more stuff, immaterial things. Information is not material. So he's just granting himself an immaterial metaphysics and trying to couch it within material reality without any justification. Because when a rock falls in the mud and it has an indentation, where's the information? These are just events that are happening. There's the information would be in your mind, which is also immaterial, but there's no information within the objects and the material itself. So he's just granting himself information, which I would not grant. I would not allow him to do things.
You, as the interpreter, is the source of the information, because otherwise it's just a thing that is. Without any interpretation, without anything collectible about it to be information.
Okay, wait, now he says, where is the intelligence in that process? Well, I mean, if you're the one observing, there's probably not. So,
where's the intelligence in that process?
You tell me.
Notice that DNA is this coded information, and that this complex information must have come from information. Information must have come from information. Well, who is the origin of that information?
Stop saying that.
According to a biblical worldview, it's God.
Information does not, in fact, have to come from information. If the shape of the rock that fell into some mud were randomly formed, that shape would contain no information. But if it fell into mud...
Wait, really?
Wait, really? What?
This is some sci-fi world building now. Everything so far has been just wrote.
I didn't even notice.
If the shape of the rock that fell into some mud were randomly formed, that would contain no information. Well, if it didn't contain information, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be a random shape or randomly formed. What he's just saying. Okay, this is the hypothetical right now. oh, I don't have to grant that information comes from other information, because what if a rock generated of itself from nothing and fell into some mud?
That's not exactly what he's saying, but it's also somewhat compatible.
Am I wrong?
He's just saying that randomness means that there is no information, but we can study randomness. We can study degree of difference between the points. All the stuff about it being random doesn't mean it doesn't have information. But there's also another problem which I'm highlighting in my note. What he's saying here doesn't follow at all. An informationless thing cannot leave information on something else. What happens when so what happens when two intangible things reach each other? They don't become tangible. The same way, something which is informationless cannot leave information, which also has interesting implication relating to causality, because again, if you walk backwards, you eventually reach the point where all information is gathered, which can't be infinite. Maybe I was.
I wouldn't grant randomness there again. I think if you are going to say something's random, you actually have to have the macro view of the data set to determine what's random and not. I mean, it's just, you can't. I mean, from my understanding, you can't define randomness without the full set of information. But still, he's saying if the shape of a rock that fell into some mud were randomly formed, is he saying the rock is randomly formed? Like it's an eternal rock, but it was not created because once it randomly formed, it was already in existence. So therefore it couldn't have been created. That's what he was saying about the universe earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The shape, the indentation would not be random. So if something came from total randomness, then its effects would not be random. So we can, again, this is just like the meaning. Everything is meaningless, but I can create my own meaning. Okay, this thing is random, generated from nothing randomness, but its effects are not random. How is that not special pleading? It would not. It'd be determined by the shape of the rock, which was determined by randomness. So how is it not determined by randomness?
Completely incoherent.
And therefore contain no information. So if something's random, it contains no information. But wouldn't it not be able to be random if it contained no information? Because it just wouldn't be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is granting randomness, granting information. How would something random, truly random, if we granted that, not contain information? You'd just be basically, especially from his naturalistic view, that everything's these unchanging laws that are eternal. Wouldn't you just have to say that it's like an unknown natural, like, oh, one day we'll be smart enough to determine what the causality is. We just say random because that our finite minds haven't wrapped themselves around it yet.
Something which I just realized, maybe he doesn't mean that it doesn't contain information. He just means that it doesn't have a pattern.
I mean, yeah, to me, it'd be saying that I cannot discern pattern, so therefore I call it random. But that wouldn't actually be saying that it has no information or discernible information. It's just, I feel like you'd have to go with unknown natural. Like I have the faith that this will be shown to be naturalistically caused. Like to me, it would be contradictory if he grants that.
As soon as you can collect data about a thing, then your very correction of the data would be the information. So the only way to have no information is to have nothing to collect.
Yeah, this is hurting my head looking at this. I'm trying to be,
as charitable as possible, and yeah.
I don't. Doesn't make any
sense.
sense.
The indentation would not be random.
This guy wrote all this out thinking that, oh yeah, I'll get him.
Be determined by the shape of the rock. Even if the shape of the rock were random and therefore contain no information, the shape of the indentation it left would be causally determined, which is information.
The practice test asks this question: can this worldview work in real life? Atheism, it offers no hope beyond the grave. I like this quote, 1 Corinthians 15:19, which states, if in this life only we have hope in Christ, we are of all men most miserable. Without God, despair.
It turned into Jordan Peterson a little bit. We are most miserable.
Often replaces hope.
There are lots of ideas.
Yes, I'm saying.
No, I was just saying that I do not think I cannot imitate his voice right in the moment. I want
Is
to,
that
I
they
want to
give
make
us
the
hope if
Kermit
we
impression,
believe in them,
but
which
I
are
cannot,
nonetheless entirely false.
There are lots of ideas which can give us hope. Oh gosh. If we believe in them, which are nonetheless entirely false. Here's another defeater. Why ought we believe true things? In your perspective, if you believe in evolution and it's like all just determined by naturalistic forces of competition and it's natural selection, all that, then we ought, I mean, you could say we ought do whatever gives us that competitive advantage. So if I'm more competitive than you by believing false things that give me more benefit, then you can't actually argue in favor of believing true things, even if we grant all that, even if we grant objective truth, which he doesn't believe in.
Very true, very true. And I think,
Yeah, so that, again, it's just like you're stepping up to debate and make arguments, but you can't even tell us why we ought debate, why ought we come to the truth. The only argument I've ever heard is like, well, because believing true things comports with reality. And again, why ought we believe in reality if being delusional gives us more benefits? If it's all just about utility, if it's all utility, then truth doesn't matter. Whatever gives you the most utility, which is from your own subjective goals of feeling good or whatever, then we're actually incentivized to believe anything that's false. And you actually be going against the incentives by trying to make me believe in true things that wouldn't be giving me a competitive advantage.
Speaking of this exact thing of believing delusions and everything to follow incentives, that basically entirely explains the trans and queer movement.
Yeah. Yes. Very much so. Do we want to do another video? I mean, that 10-minute video, we're at an hour and a half.
I cannot.
I don't know. It's probably much later for you.
Yeah, it's almost midnight. We could look at the comments to see if anyone finds anything wrong with this, like his comments.
Sure. In the video.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no master, whose slave will I be? Is what I heard in his very first sentence. All right. Good Yelp review.
Could you control scroll to make the text bigger?
Yes, of course. Oh, too much. Too bad theism doesn't pass these tests. All right. Not telling us how or anything. If atheism can't explain the order and origin of the universe, is it really aligned with reality? Atheism makes no claims to explain either of these things, nor does anyone need to. Okay, then we don't either. This is shifting the burden of proof. This is what that is. Atheists love shifting the burden of proof and then saying that we do it.
Yeah, and also, can you justify not answering something which is this important? Like, why?
I don't need to. Nobody needs to.
Yeah. But they still have problems with other things.
This is the atheists. They have a very small book that they all read out of. I don't know where it is, but they must, because they literally all say the same thing, like ambots, dude. I can't be the only one sick to death of atheism. Atheists believe such and such. No, atheism is the answer to one single solitary question. Do you believe in gods? No, that's it. No, that's not what atheism is. Why are you an atheist? And I know about atheism way more than you. Atheism is an entire worldview. It has when you say that there's no such thing as God, and you believe that in all these metaphysical things of the universe, you have to give a justification for why the state of affairs is the case without a God, because the transcendental argument shows us that for the universe to be the case that it is currently in, it necessitates a creator. And you're just saying that I don't have to prove anything. I can just say there's no God and then make anything else up I want. It's ludicrous. It's saying that you don't have a worldview, which you can only say if you are a person with a worldview.
Yeah,
it's exhausting. I mean, this isn't any more than I was expecting, but I'm still searching for atheists that are above Reddit tier, and they're all. It's a total flattening. There's no hierarchy in atheism. There's no like, okay, well, that's a really strong atheist, or wow, that guy. I mean, there's like more intelligent people, like Nietzsche was pretty intelligent. David Hume's pretty intelligent, but they don't really give any actual good arguments in favor of their position. They're good at pointing out flaws in other arguments, but there's no positive justifications for their own positions. So in that way,
and ironically,
atheism is just a
ironically enough, these better philosophies were lamenting their own loss of faith and the more profound dimensions of religion, which they weren't holding to anymore.
Dano says that's right, Westford, wanting to claim neutrality. Yeah, it's the myth of neutrality. I don't really have a position. It's just the answer to one question. Well, I don't actually have a worldview, and I don't actually have to justify anything because Christianity is just the single answer to one solitary question. Do you believe in God? Yes. So therefore, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to make any arguments. Actually, you have to do that. You have to do that for me because I just answered one question. So what do you want from me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what atheism is. Bro, what? Religion is a social construct, as is oddly enough society. Well, again, if this is there's so many ways to defeat it. If Christianity is a social construct, again, this goes back to the utility argument. If evolution is all about utility and what benefits us, and religion benefits us, then you have no argument against it. You're actually arguing against your own evolutionary incentives to argue against religion. And you actually say that those evolutionary incentives bring about religion from this worldview, this answer to one solitary question.
About what this guy from this Ilu of Tacos, when they say, I don't know what atheism means, ascribing this position to theists means that the theists don't agree with the atheists about atheists. They're not as favorable to it. So this means that the theists must not understand the atheists.
Right. Yeah, you don't agree with atheism. You just might not understand it. Real atheism has never really been tried before.
Something which I wanted to say, and now that the video is over, that so many of these positions, both in the comments and in the video makers, are the same way. They're just gut reactions, which they never considered more than just that. How could anyone believe as much nonsense as this guy said in the video? If he ever introspected, he ever analyzed his beliefs a little bit more than just the first step.
I kind of have this idea that when you believe certain things, you start to these things that are not true, you start to embody them more, like kind of how you become like what you worship. So when you don't believe that you have free will, you start to embody that. So I think people actually relinquish or atrophy, maybe is a better word, parts of their soul, parts of themselves. So a lot of these atheists are actually atrophying their own reasoning faculty because they believe things that are so absurd and so contradictory that they can't justify, that they just assume, and they think everyone else is stupid, that they haven't actually engaged their mind enough to think these things out, that their ability to do such is atrophied. Like people all on their smartphones and TikTok, if you try to sit down and read a book, you're just going to have no attention span. You're not going to be able to sit there and focus on it and have comprehension, even if you read it. So like these people are not enacting their ability, you could say, to reason and have a clear mind.
Speaking of what it leads to when you don't hold philosophies, look at the link in the private chat.
Okay. I didn't want to highlight this one. It's everything sounds like how I exactly feel until the quotations. It's remarkable how so many of these people confidently say the same things over and over and over and seem to think that we've not heard it all hundreds of times. You don't believe objective morality, but you act like you do, blah, blah, blah. Okay, give me an answer.
Exactly true.
I've never heard an answer. This is why I feel insane, because like all these comments, I've probably never seen any of these accounts before. They're all their own individual person, but the atheist spectrum is so narrow that they are all like identical copies of each other, and they all They say that's not a religion. They say it's not a worldview. It's just an answer to one question, but they all have like a memo that went out and like, these are the only things you are allowed to ever say. These are the things that will occupy your mind, and these are your automatic responses. And they have very little outside of that. It's actually remarkable how little cognitive activity goes into any of these comments, any of the responses, any of these talking heads that promote atheism.
Yeah, in my response, in my 2 responses to the issue I made so far, like 95% of responders, and they responded very frequently and with much zeal to them. They all were making the same mistakes. The analysis was just as shallow, and no matter how much I explain things, they just would revert to, you don't get it.
Right. And I think I think this isn't like a stupid thing. I don't think atheists like have a low IQ. I mean, I might say so as like a joke because it's hilarious, and they do have a low IQ, that is. But I think that it's something about their beliefs, the things that they've chosen to believe, that blinds them from using their reason. Like it's like they literally relinquish it, and you can't show them what's right in front of their face. They just they're I don't. It's hard to explain. It's
I'm not
because like in other things, like if I was gonna like build a house with them, I'd be able to like show them how to measure and cut, and like they'd be able to, like, no, you can't cut that. Well, why not? Because I don't believe in it. Like, it's right here. Like, what are you talking about? Like they don't have the same blindness for other things because they believe in material reality. They believe in what they see, even though they also believe in tons and tons of things they don't see, even though they say they don't, because they only believe in material and all that. So it's like because they live in constant cognitive dissonance. They believe in contradictory things, self-defeating things. A naturalistic, materialist perspective has to rely on immaterial things. So therefore, it's a contradiction. So they've blinded themselves from being able to reason through those things. It's hard to actually get them to see it because they're willfully ignorant, willfully blind.
Yeah, you cannot fill a bucket with nothingness.
Right. A glass can only spill what it contains. So religion, 1,000 years, praise for the orderly source of meaning, scholasticism, science, civilizational victory, billions, trillions must be baptized. Hedonism, materialism, 100%, 100 years, nihilism, relativism, 100 years, postmodern cope with ideology. No objectivity, social constructs, hegemonic oppression, 100 years. Hey, what if we like destroy our civilization? The global decline of fertility rates. Humans are bad though. Nature good though, even though humans came from nature. It's another one of those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Nature must be bad if humans bad though. Yeah. It's sad. Well, what did we learn? Did we learn anything?
Well, we were a little bit better off expressing what we believe, and we've seen confirmation of the lacks in the atheist position, and hopefully the more open-minded, if any of them find this video, see the same problems that we do, and consider Christianity more deeply, and hopefully will join and baptize.
Well, I suspect they'll have the same amount of reflection in their comments that they do in this guy's presentation and all the comments in that, which is just gut reactions and boilerplate talking points. But I challenge anybody to go through this. If you've stuck to the end and you're an atheist, and you think I'm mentally retarded, which I am. Please tell me why. Don't just say you're retarded and you're stupid and you're coping and you said God real though. God is real, obviously. And please tell me anywhere I'm wrong, because I want to find the truth. I want to seek after the truth. I don't want to just dunk on atheists because, let's be honest, it's like kicking toddlers, and you can't really feel good. You can only feel good about yourself for so long for kicking the weak and the malnourished. I mean, I'll do it. I did it for an hour and 40 minutes. I've been talking badly about mentally handicapped people. So, I mean, I'm going to keep doing it. Why not? It's easy. But this is like I look at it as chess. A lot of these positions, like I have gone through, just like the guy said, I hear the same thing over and over and over and over. It's like, yeah, this is a chess game. This is the same moves. And it's interesting because sometimes you'll hear somebody say something a little different, and that might give you a little more insight into how the game's played. Yeah, well, yeah, that too. Hopefully, be baptized. Do it now, Deus Volt. But I can get a little tired sometimes. Like, okay, I've heard this. This is just the is-ought gap over and over. Okay, you did it again with different words. Like, you still don't see the issue. How do you not see the issue? But it's trying to sharpen the sword to. There's got to be some way to reason with these people. There's got to be. I like I said, I don't think they're stupid. They're just blind. So how do you, like? Maybe you can't. I don't know. Part of me thinks that you should be able to, because I mean I can see the flaws, and people in this chat are like, oh yeah, that's true, and they make more points. And but the atheists say I'm stupid. So maybe it's pride. Yeah, can you reason with somebody who's prideful that refuses to see the truth? Well, until their pride is gone, until they've stopped being willfully ignorant, and then can't really reason with them. But I don't know. What do we do?
What we can.
Yeah, like progressive revelation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, that's my strategy so far, you see. I mean, I just tell it like it is. I mean, like they said, truth is just what comports with reality. They are mentally inferior to my 2-year-old daughter, and it's no fault of their own. Well, it is, because it's self-willed. But I'm gonna give them that out there. They don't, they've been propagandized.
Yeah, at some point when you realize how many challenges are to what you say, and the things which you say don't add up to such a degree that you can contradict yourself in the same minute multiple times. Yeah, you have to will yourself into seeing, okay, so what I'm thinking of doesn't work. What would?
Yeah, and I think it's just like Discord said, progressive revelation. I mean, that's my experience with Orthodoxy. You come to these things. There's all these terms, even like with philosophy, hearing, justification, ontology, all these terms. Like, you don't really understand them. You're kind of putting things together, thinking the context, and as you go over, it's like reading a book. Like you read it a second time, you see more things that you missed because you have the further, like, wider context. You see the foreshadowing of things to come and all this stuff. So, but I don't know. Again, I've seen people in these chats for like 2 years now that just come and they still don't understand the same thing being told to them over and over. Like, people just have to give up their pride and be humble to admit that they're wrong. Maybe that's the biggest thing. It's like maybe the sunk cost fallacy. I've been wrong for so long that I must keep being wrong.
By the time that they realize that they're wrong, I don't think that they want to be wrong. So they just never think of anything that they do critically. So they never come to their realization.
Well, prayer would be our primary source of attack when it comes to this. Pray for the toddlers. They need grace. They need mercy. They've been propagandized. They've had the world tell them a bunch of nonsense, and they believed it for so long that they don't even think that their worldview is a worldview, which is absurd.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you wanna shout yourself out one more time? You wanna any
Yeah.
last words before we sign up? I know it's a lot later there where you are than it is here. It's midday for me.
Yeah, it's midnight here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just achieved, but it's fine. I'm occasionally on podcasts which start at midnight, but that's only on some Mondays, usually once every 2 months. But anyway, so I'm Mass Creation Broadcast. I have a channel on YouTube, and I'm also active on Twitter. I've mainly cover politics with some application to media. I have until now video on the Joker movie and on Star Wars, which will have a sequel, my Star Wars video addressing more of its politics. And I also respond to religious content. The main drive of my channel is to create a new aristocracy. So what are the traits of nobility, how to change the way that we think and the way that we act to have this nobler spirit and have the capacity to wield political power and achieve our goals more on the political and perhaps even religious around this perspective, and remind people to abandon myths believed currently. And there will be various examples on my channel.
Some
I hope
Ant
that
Bear
you-
Pig in the chat's asking if you're from Serbia.
I'm not, but I'm Eastern European. I know, speaking of the shill, at least one person subscribed during this chat is Discordia. And hello.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for showing up. Thanks for helping me kick some toddlers, show them what's for. You can never go easy on your kids. You'll there's a
Yeah, don't spoil them.
Norm Macdonald joke was, I felt bad for playing basketball with my 3-year-old. I thought I'd crush his will if I didn't let him win, so I did. And eventually he became a grown man and I became older. So he just kept kicking my ass. And he said, Dad, I've always thought you were just incredibly lacking in athletics. You've just been a weak, feeble man I've always been able to beat. It's like, no, trust me. I could have kicked your ass. Well, you never did, Dad. So never go easy on them. Destroy them. Destroy their will. It will make them stronger. It's what they want anyways, right? They want to be evolutionarily fit. So give it to them, buddy. All right, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. I took off my exterior door in my house and it's just a gaping hole and I got to go build a frame and try to get that sealed up before the sun goes down. So everybody, thanks for coming. Please like, comment, subscribe, go to Mass Creations Broadcasts, X, his YouTube, do the same there. And God bless everybody. Farewell.